Good morning. Good morning, everybody around the world, NFT community, mostly artists, I'm proud to say, that watch this show. Good morning, August 29th, 2022, Berlin. This is Adrian Pocobelli's Artist Journal, your artist reporter, here on the scene, just seeing things, sharing thoughts, nothing too formal, a diary of sorts. Here I am, for you and for me. I hope you all are well. Let's see, a few things. So I was looking at this work. I can't remember the name of this. This is like, you may recognize this artist. This is one of the artists you first discover. Uyo66, that's probably why I don't remember the name. This is one of the artists you first discover on Tezos when you arrive, at least for me, in my discovery process. I guess there's something to be said for just having that consistent style and you just do it a million different iterations of it. Uyo66 is pretty good at it too. I picked up a bunch of Uyo66 yesterday actually, so let me just actually say something on that because, you know, here I am talking about work that I buy. I don't sell it. I haven't sold it. I haven't sold any. I just want to let everybody know, like, I don't think that would be appropriate. Let's say maybe after, I don't know, a week or even a month after a show, if I'm going to be like, put it this way, what I don't want to be is one of those crypto channels that, you know, use their audience as exit liquidity. And, you know, I was starting to think to I was like, so all to say, I think I've sold 2 pieces that belong to other people in the entire time that I have been on this. And they're just, sometimes you just don't want a piece in your collection. And that was it. Okay. I sell my own pieces and I happily promote those. That's legit, but I just want to let people know when I buy stuff and then I'm talking about it the next day, nobody's mentioned it to me. But I just want you to know, I think like a week at the earliest is when I could sell something. And there's no incentive for me to sell, frankly, at this point, because tax law in Germany, not tax advice, but as far as I understand it, if you hold on to your crypto for a year, you don't actually have to pay capital gains on it if you wait a year to sell your crypto. So this art, like, there's zero incentive for me unless I'm desperate for money, in which case, I hope you'll be okay with me selling something here after a week or a month. Whatever is, and feel free to put your comments in the comments if you have a thought on this, because we're here to talk art and really to share the good news on what's going on out here. And and we want to keep it that way. So I just want to let people know, because, crypto scene, you get all sorts of unsavory people doing unsavory things. So let's head that one off at the pass, as they say. Yeah, I was sort of, what kind of amazed me about this was look at the amount of offers that this got, that Uyo66 got. And again, that recognizable style, it was the offers. I FOMO'd in, actually. And I believe the auction is done. It's not an auction, actually, it's offers. So it's just like we were seeing with Louis Osborne. Look at all these offers. I FOMO'd in because I just think this is one of the best pieces he has put up, or Uyo66 has put up. We can look at some of their pieces. Like this, and I wanted it for the collection. I may, at a certain point in a year or in a month or 2 months or 6, I'm not really eager to sell anything. I think everything, put it this way, I think everything is so undervalued on the Tezos blockchain as far as art that, to make a few bucks here and there, some people do that. And some people look like they're good at it. But for me, it's like, I'm thinking this is going to go much, much higher. Now, that being said, that's another point that I want to bring up is I could be totally wrong on this, guys. I could be totally wrong. I have high conviction on buying this art that, that it's basically, I'm not going to, lose my money. But who knows? I mean, we really don't know. So, and, the more sure you are of something, the more you should question it. So anyway, let's just a quick thing on Uyo 66, because you know what this reminds me of is kind of work of underground comics artists of the 1960s. I used to work in a comic store. Many of you, look at all these offers. So another reason to just kind of be aware of this guy. Many of you will have heard the name Robert Crumb before. And Zap Comics. I mean, this is kind of like the a cultural nerve center of the Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, late 60s hippie scene. I mean, famous stuff. There are many printings of this. That's why it looks so cheap. 60 cents. That one's probably quite late. A nice copy, though. You see Mr. Natural there. So this is Robert Crumb, he was the artist for adult, so a lot of satire. And in Zap Comics and in other psychedelic publications, there was a lot of art some of the art looked like this. There were about, 5 or 6 artists that you'd see regularly, and one, not looking exactly, I'm not saying Uyo is derivative, but I am saying it's in that tradition a little bit of this psychedelic kind of 1960s underground comic art. Now, again, just a quick note on Robert Crumb, very respected. If you haven't heard, and even if you have, so respected it might surprise you. I mean, he put out the Genesis. If you know Robert Hughes, who was Time Magazine's art historian for a while, he compared in the 80s and 90s. I just kind of vaguely know. He put out some really good videos. I think they're called The Shock of the New. And so he was a well-known art historian, kind of, one of these guys, like a Carl Sagan of the art scene. Not that far, but almost. I mean, The Shock of the New, you can check out on YouTube. You should. As a matter of fact, it's a great series, and you'll learn something if you haven't seen it. He compared Crumb to Bruegel. And remember, we were just talking about Bruegel and Ratcloxy and that Babylon. So if you look here, you can get some images, hopefully. Yeah, here is, he's a brilliant artist. Here's his, he did the Book of Genesis, illustrated by R. Crumb. And it's long when you read the comic version. It's almost hard to read. So he does a real service for us. And he's still going. I believe he's in a chateau in France, actually, with his wife. You don't need to go far to get controversial with Crumb. He's an important name to know. It's time for Bible studies. So, it's really raw humor, satire, brutal satire. Satire almost in the tradition of the Marquis de Sade. So, and, this is another very important name in the tradition, especially in the surrealist, that kind of parallel tradition. It almost starts with Sade, say for André Breton, the founder of the surrealist movement. Actually, he's not the founder of the surrealist movement, but he was kind of he wrote the manifesto. He was sort of seen as the Pope. I think they even use that word. The surrealists were very literary. Magritte is very literary. His titles are actually a part of the work, and loved Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. And so André Breton, all to say, pointed to Sade as a very important kind of starting point of this dark tradition that goes through. And we were mentioning Rimbaud, who, by the way, didn't die at 21, died at 37. I actually double checked. I was that doesn't sound right. He stopped writing. All his poems, supposedly, were done by 21. I think he was a gun runner, I believe, between France and Algeria. That's something I read a million years ago. So double check that one too. And he died at 37, but kind of wrote everything, was done by 21. So there's a very important tradition that influenced the visual arts. Going on a bit of a tangent here, including Sade, Marquis de Sade, The 120 Days of Sodom, Justine, Juliet, on and on. I actually kind of recommend, like, if you're in a good bookstore, you might be able to find these books, just to open them up, just so you have a clue. These aren't books you read start to finish, unless you're like a scholar of Sade. Because they're actually, it's not something you read start to finish. Another very, very, very important author to mention, who also wrote, I think, very young, is L'Autre Amant, Les Chants de Maldoror. He's credited with probably the seminal image of surrealism. Then we're going to jump back to Uyo 66 here. Yeah, Les Chants de Maldoror. Here we go. Yeah, I had this copy, actually. I read this book, and let me tell you, halfway through it, it's some of the maddest stuff you will ever read. It's spectacular. Huge influence on the surrealists, who's credited with this iconic image, arguably the central image of surrealism, which is the bringing together of an umbrella and a sewing machine on an operating table. The fusion of opposite realities in a new context. And this was really the axiom, would we call it? The formula in the mathematical sense of surrealism, was bringing together two opposite realities in a new context. We can go into all that. We're going to go into all that stuff soon. All to say, Crumb was a hardcore satirist who, I don't recommend in a sense lightly, but if you are interested in, be ready to be offended, though, at the same time. Like, this is just as same with Sade. It's shocking, even though that was written 1795, French Revolution. So it was a pretty crazy time, significant. So we are back. So all to say, Uyo 66 screams of that Zap Comics underground, late 1960s, early 1970s, underground comics with an X culture, very important culture. And this is a pretty nice work. So I was buying up some of Uyo 66's work up. Again, getting some nice bids. I'm not surprised. Again, it's one of these artists who you find pretty early on, and significant bids. I FOMO'd in. I wanted to get one. And you look at the work. So you see that one's particularly special. Uyo 66 has been posting on Foundation. This is another nice one. I bought this for $20 yesterday. It's always nice when you see the numbers go up like that. Who knows what the real value is? Again, it's between $280 and $62 is the real value. So it could be worth $3. So again, be careful out there. I'm kind of throwing money around. I'm doing it because I basically have a certain amount in the crypto ecosystem, and I said, okay, that can just stay there, and I kind of have my financial video game fun with it, which right now is buying a lot of art. But we'll probably, I'm kind of filling in the gaps in my collection. That's where I am right now, as far as I see all this stuff. And it'll probably be mostly just accumulating new stuff, which, and I was having these thoughts to myself, maybe, I'm kind of good a couple of weeks ago. And then, Myth puts out a 1 of 1. And so I always keep saying this to myself, but let's see. And I kind of love this scene more than ever. And it has not slowed down at all creatively. Yeah, see, okay, we got it. So that's great. So we managed to get 1 of the 10 with my FOMOing. Quick thing I wanted to do actually was something I'd missed last time. Sometimes you got to understand, for me to do these artist journals, I have to just hit record and go. Otherwise, I won't do them. Or if I start going, when I feel like it, we all know how that turns out, which is 3 days later, I'll do it, and then you can always make an excuse for it to be tomorrow. So that's why I'm doing it daily here. It's kind of almost as much for me as for you, because if I don't do it daily, I probably won't keep doing it. So that's why I just keep doing it daily when I can. So, next weekend at a wedding, I probably won't be able to. But otherwise, if I'm here and I can, I will, is sort of how I'm positioning this in my brain. But one thing I missed yesterday, as I went into all my screenshots, was we kind of missed talking about Minta's work a little bit. And I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about that, and I thought, I need to make sure that she gets her due. And it is a her. So anyways, I thought we could take a little look at Minta's work as well. Because again, this screenshot business, look, we can see a kind of a direct relationship with pop art. With pop art. Again, taking this kind of iconography of the popular psyche or mass subject and kind of playing with it as a Rauschenberg or a Warhol might. Okay, so we're kind of in that that's what I bring to the table when I start looking at this stuff. I go, okay, that's the framework where I start to go, because I did a lot of screenshots, and I think I like Minta's a little better, because I was doing these things were kind of crooked, and I was just experimenting with things, and when you look with time, you go, oh, you probably should have just been straight. So Minta's doing some good work here. I picked this one up, actually, when this first came out, because I was like, ooh, screenshot artist. Very nice. Playing with the dark mode, a painting in a painting, a painting in a painting. This is a fun subject matter. And yeah, we're going to get into a nice little portrait of Ludmila Srta-Trigo. I read in a tweet that she put out that I think she was mentioning me when she said she was doing my portrait, which again, thank you, Minta, that she's kind of documenting the history of the Tezos art scene or something to that effect. And so that's a fun subject matter. And yeah, again, since we were talking about Breton and Sade and Lautréamont and Rimbaud and Magritte, so I come from that tradition that sees the pop art movement as an extension of surrealism, okay? And if you look at modernism, what is it? It's kind of like this deep introspection of the inside of the mind. If we think of James Joyce's Ulysses, final chapter, the stream of consciousness chapter, I think it might be through the eyes or through the mind of his wife, not Joyce's, but I think it's Stephen Dedalus. Or if you look at Finnegan's Wake, which is almost like this incomprehensible book by Joyce that he put out later, I think right before he died. He was going blind, hey? If I know the story right, he had a patch on his eye, and I think he was writing really large letters. I think it was Joyce. In a very interesting tradition with poets and being blind, so maybe fitting in a weird sort of way. So I come from this tradition that sees surrealism as a predecessor to pop art, or pop art as an extension of surrealism. And it kind of starts with this modernist investigation of inner space. So we think of Picasso and the Cubism. Okay, what is Cubism? Well, we could see it as one interpretation is maybe it's an attempt to show our actual experience, which is fragments here, fragments there, and to actually make a portrait of inner space, as Ballard would put it. And what we see with we could also see that again in Ulysses, in the final chapter, or even you could argue throughout the book, this kind of internal examination of what's going on there. This show has gotten heavy quickly, hasn't it? So anyways, surrealism could be seen as adding Freud into the mix, where all of a sudden it's not just what is our experience of the inside, but what is the unconscious content of our experience, right? And playing with these kind of unconscious elements. So like Freud in a couple of sentences is basically the so-called dream work, the work of the therapist is in a dream, there's what you remember, which Freud would call the manifest content, the surface content, what you remember. And then there's the latent content, the underlying content of the dream, which would be the reality. So the task of the therapist is to examine the manifest content, what you remember and are telling to the therapist, to get to the latent content, what is actually going on, which in many cases for Freud was erotic in nature. So the surrealists loved this stuff because, again, it was a deeper examination into human nature. And that's kind of like the thread that is carried throughout this entire tradition. Back to Sade, because what did Sade do? He had all these outrageous perversions that he was cataloging in the 120 Days of Sodom, for example, or these super, outrageously, perverted tales, let's say, in Justine or Juliet. And he was cataloging these fantasies, basically these brutal, in fictional mode, importantly. And what this becomes is a kind of cataloging, by cataloging the perversion, so to speak, as he does in 120 Days of Sodom, that becomes a kind of cataloging of human nature and also this kind of dark side of human. That's why there's this darkness in this part of the tradition, as well as in Freud, Oedipus complex, all this stuff. This isn't like Summer in the Park type content. So back to our pop art business here. So if surrealism is examining what we might call the furniture of the mind, where a cigar is no longer just a cigar, we can look at the pop art as a cataloging of, or a portrait of the popular psyche, of the collective unconscious, of the mass subject. Okay, so you could argue, because what is the value of these pop art works, for example? What is the value of a surrealist work? But take a pop art work. What is the value? Who cares? Is that just a nice painting? Or is there something deeper at work when we look at a Rauschenberg? And I would argue we are seeing something deeper. We are seeing a cataloging, almost in the tradition of Sade, but maybe in a much kind of gentler way with Rauschenberg, a kind of portrait of the inside of our collective psychology. Okay? So that's why when I see this, this is why I was working on screenshots, and this is why I think it's a completely valid and incredibly interesting area to pursue, which is you're playing with the iconography that is in the back of all of our minds, right? And that becomes, and then that's where the magician kind of stuff comes in, and you're mixing and matching, and, So I don't want to go too far on this. I've gone on quite a tangent here, but I just wanted to give Minta her due here in today's episode. I bought this one too. An error occurred loading this imagery try. I've been there. So I really like this direction and I want to see where it goes. Minta has just started. I think she just said, I've been on this for 3 weeks. She's doing fabulously. Let's just look. Look at how much work she has already. So, and I love this stuff, frankly. How much is this? 20, wow. She's got a good market too. People are buying this. They're buying into the concept here. As they should. Let's see. Yeah, Diego. Okay, very good. Otherwise, nobody's selling it. And he wants 20 Tez. Good. So, excellent. So, yeah. So, isn't it great? We got this kind of small community. So, enjoy it while it lasts. Enjoy the good times here. Just a very quick update. As far as what I'm working on, I'm kind of working on assembly line type processes with the Screen Memories series. So, I don't know if you can, there we go. So, I'm working on 3 or 4 of these at the same time. And yeah, I should have loaded up the other one, but you guys have seen the other ones briefly. So I'm just working on 3 of these at a time. I'm trying to assembly line them, so hopefully I get 3 done at the same time or around that time. That is what I am up to. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this unusual episode. Until next time, take care.